You ever get that feeling like life's just a well-set trap? You're walking along, minding your own business, thinking everything's fine, and then snap goes the jaw, and suddenly, your world's upside down. For me, it started with an invitation. A polite little envelope on my desk, cream-colored and embossed like it came from someone with more style than soul. My name scrawled on the front in handwriting I recognized instantly. Rachel's. We hadn't seen each other in months. Not since that awful argument in the kitchen, the one where she'd thrown a wine glass, and I dodged it like I was in a Quentin Tarantino flick. Divorce had been the quiet conclusion after years of passive aggression and 2 Christmases without a real tree. But this letter wasn't about divorce. No, this was a housewarming party. Come see the new place, it read. Just a few friends, good food, and laughter. It would mean a lot to me if you came. It was signed, Rachel and Derek. That was the first time I saw the name. Derek. I said it aloud once, then again, with increasing disgust. Derek. It sounded like a guy who wore loafers without socks. The kind of guy who calls your ex, babe, before you've even moved out the last box. I should have thrown that envelope in the trash. Instead, I RSVP'd yes. Not because I missed her. Not even because I was curious. I just needed to see it. The life she'd built without me. The stage where she'd perform her new role, someone else's leading lady. A part of me hoped I'd walk in and find her miserable. Maybe Derek would be bald. Maybe the place would smell like regret and vanilla candles. But life rarely delivers that cleanly. When I pulled into the driveway, I was greeted by laughter. Warm, contented laughter. Their new home was beautiful, modern, with ivy climbing up the brick. And there she was, on the porch, wearing a yellow sundress and barefoot, smiling like betrayal wasn't even a memory. Liam, she called out, like we were old friends reconnecting at a barbecue. You made it. I stepped out of the car and nodded. Wouldn't miss it for the world. And I meant that. Because I had a plan. Rachel led me through the house like a proud real estate agent who also happened to have gutted your heart. The interior was, well, it was perfect. Exposed beams, tastefully minimal decor, a record player spinning some jazz that made the wine glasses seem fancier. Everything had that curated touch, like she'd walked through our old life with a pen, underlining the things she wanted to keep and crossing out anything that looked remotely like me. This is the kitchen, she said, like I hadn't spent years cooking her Sunday breakfast in our old one. We redid the counters ourselves. We. That word again. It stabbed a little more than I wanted it to. Looks nice, I said, running a hand along the granite. Not quite the chip tile we used to have, huh? She smiled, tight-lipped, like a woman trying not to flinch at a joke that cuts too close. We all grow up, eventually. That's when Derek appeared. Now, I expected Derek to look like a cologne commercial or maybe a discount Bond villain. But no, Derek was unremarkable. Nice haircut, button-down shirt, handshake that said he read books about leadership but skipped the chapters on humility. Liam, great to finally meet you, he said, as if I hadn't spent 7 years putting my life into a box so she could unpack it into his. Yeah, I replied, shaking his hand. Big fan of your work. He blinked. My work. Yeah, I said, eyes fixed. Wrecking homes. Takes talent. Derek chuckled nervously. Rachel did that sharp little inhale she always did before a situation turned. Let's not do this here, she murmured, placing a hand on my arm like she still had the right. I brushed it off. I wasn't there to throw punches. Not yet. I was there to see. To feel the weight of what she'd chosen. To understand just how far gone we really were. She walked away to greet more guests, and I watched her slip into the party like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't buried every part of myself that could have warned me she was drifting. Derek stayed behind for a moment, clearing his throat. Look, man, he started, like we were about to have some noble heart-to-heart. I know this is awkward. I cut him off. It's not awkward. It's just information. He raised a brow. Information, I repeated. About who she is now. What she wants. I'm learning, Derek. That's all. And you know what? You're teaching me a lot. He didn't respond. Probably because he didn't know how to. I gave him a pat on the shoulder. Thanks for the tour, I said, walking off toward the living room. I was learning, all right. And class was just getting started. The living room looked like an Instagram ad come to life. Candles flickered in recycled glass holders. A string quartet was playing, live. Not a recording. An actual string quartet in the corner, next to a cheese board so large it needed its own area code. I stood there, glass of red wine in hand, watching Rachel play hostess like she was born for it. Laughing too loud. Hugging too long. Her hand rested on Derek's back every few minutes, like she needed to confirm his spine was still there. Someone asked me, "How do you know Rachel?" I didn't miss a beat. Biblically. They blinked. I smiled. The night wore on. Every so often, Derek would glance my way like he wasn't sure if I was going to set the place on fire or write a Yelp review. Rachel was better at hiding it, but I could tell the tension was building under that perfect surface. And then, like all well-timed disasters, came the toast. Rachel raised a glass in the middle of the room, Derek's arm around her waist. "We just want to say thank you," she said, beaming. "To friends, to love, to new beginnings." People clinked glasses and smiled and nodded. I raised mine too. Couldn't help myself. "To new beginnings," I echoed. "And to full disclosures." The air shifted, just slightly. Rachel's smile faltered for half a second. Derek's hand tensed on her hip. I wasn't done. "It's just good," I continued, "to be honest, you know? Especially when you're building something new. You want to make sure the foundation isn't made of secrets." Now the room was silent. You could hear the violinist stop mid-bow. Rachel gave a small, brittle laugh. "Liam, maybe we don't." But I held up a hand. No, it's fine," I said, my voice calm, almost amused. "I'm just saying, it's nice when people are upfront. Like, for instance, if someone was already seeing someone else while married, hypothetically, wouldn't it be better if that came out before the wedding photos got printed?" Derek stepped forward. "Okay, that's enough." I turned to him. "Relax, Derek. You're not the first guy to fall for someone else's wife. You just might be the last to know when it started." Rachel set her glass down hard. "We're done here," she said quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, you are." And I walked out of that house with the taste of wine and finality in my mouth. But this wasn't closure. This was the beginning of something else. I didn't drive home that night. Instead, I sat in my truck a block down from their pristine little house, watching through the trees as guests filtered out, faces tight with the awkwardness that clings to a party gone sideways. The quartet had stopped playing. The porch lights flicked off one by one. And then, finally, the door closed. I watched that house like it owed me something. Maybe because it did. See, I wasn't just there to make a scene. That toast? That was me scratching the surface. The real message hadn't been delivered yet. In the glove compartment of my truck, wrapped in a padded envelope, sat a flash drive. On it were 37 days worth of security cam footage. Not of their house. I'm not that kind of reckless. No, this was from our old house. The one Rachel and I had shared, back before she left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter like a receipt she no longer needed. I'd installed cameras a few months before things started going south. Routine home security. She knew about them. Apparently, she forgot. And apparently, Derek didn't mind stepping into frame. The footage started innocently enough, Rachel bringing in groceries, taking calls on speaker while folding laundry, singing off-key while cooking pasta. But by week 3, Derek made his debut. He'd show up mid-morning, sometimes in gym shorts, sometimes in a button-down shirt, like he'd just come from seducing someone else's promotion. They'd laugh, talk, sit close on the couch. And then, well, I won't describe the details. Let's just say Derek had a habit of drinking my bourbon while putting his shoes on afterward. I didn't watch all the clips. Just enough to timestamp the truth. Enough to know they started before she filed the papers. Enough to know I wasn't crazy. I took the flash drive and walked into my buddy Griff's print shop the next day. "You want what?" he asked, eyebrow raised. "I want one of those QR codes," I said, placing the envelope on the counter. "Big enough to scan from a flyer." Griff looked at me like I'd just ordered a pina colada at a biker bar. "You trying to sell NFTs now?" "Nope. Just want to tell a story. A true one." By the time I left, I had a stack of flyers, clean black and white, QR code centered, and 2 words beneath it in bold. "Ask Rachel." I didn't post them around town. That would have been petty. No, I mailed them. To her office. To Derek's. To her mom, who always thought I wasn't assertive enough. To the caterer who did their party. To the yoga studio where she found her center every Tuesday and Thursday while simultaneously finding her affair. And one, sealed in a red envelope, addressed to her new therapist. Let them scan it. Let them see the truth Rachel never thought would surface. But that wasn't the end. Oh no. You see, for someone like Rachel, public perception was currency. Her image was everything. She curated her life like an Instagram grid, symmetrical, tasteful, and completely fictional. And I was about to go full filter-free. 3 days after the party, she showed up at my apartment. Not the front door. The fire escape. I was eating leftover lo mein and watching old reruns of Frasier when I heard the window slide open. There she was, crouched in yoga pants and a hoodie, face red with fury. "What the hell did you do?" she hissed, stepping inside. I didn't even pause the episode. "You'll have to be more specific," I said, gesturing with a chopstick. "The QR code," she snapped. "My inbox is full of confused questions. People think it's a joke. My boss got one. Did he scan it?" Her eyes narrowed. "You don't get to humiliate me." "No," I said, setting down the carton. "You did that yourself. I'm just subtitling the footage." She paced the room, too furious to sit. "You think you're clever," she said. "You think this is going to make you feel better?" I stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked down at the street. "No, it won't," I admitted. "But it might make you think twice the next time you call betrayal a lifestyle choice." She crossed her arms. "So this is revenge?" I looked at her. Really looked. The same woman I once swore I'd love forever. The one who cried in my arms the day her dog died. The one who made me pancakes on birthdays and danced to Fleetwood Mac in the kitchen. But also, the one who lied with a smile and kissed someone else while still sleeping in my bed. "No," I said finally. "This is accountability." She left without another word. Slid back out the window the same way she came, like a ghost retracing her steps. I sat down, pressed play on the next episode of Frasier, and finished my cold lo mein in peace. But inside me, something was shifting. And it wasn't forgiveness. Funny thing about vengeance, it doesn't taste the way you think it will. The QR stunt? That was the appetizer. A statement. A warning shot across the bow. I hadn't even unsheathed the real weapon yet. Because beneath the flash drive, beneath the flyers, beneath all that calculated theatrics, lay one simple truth I hadn't told anyone yet. Derek wasn't the first. He wasn't even the third. After Rachel's midnight fire escape stunt, I sat awake until sunrise, scrolling through old photos like I was thumbing through a book I didn't write. There we were, 6 years ago in Napa, Rachel holding a glass of red to the light like she knew what she was doing. I had my arm around her waist. The smiles looked real. I zoomed in. Just behind us, at another table, sat a man in a blue golf shirt and mirrored sunglasses. I remembered him vaguely. He talked to Rachel at the bar while I was in the restroom. Said something about how she looked like a sunrise. At the time, I thought it was harmless. Turns out, Rachel collected sunrises like stamps. That night in Napa was the first time I realized I didn't know the woman beside me. I just didn't know it then. But now I knew everything. See, in the weeks following our separation, I did something I never thought I would. I got smart. I stopped being the hurt husband and started being the observer. I went through our cloud backups, bank statements, photos, and those hidden Instagram accounts she didn't think I knew about. The receipts were everywhere, dates that didn't add up, hotels charged to her card in cities she never mentioned, deleted photos that left behind time-stamped ghosts. One name kept surfacing, Gabriel. I remembered Gabriel. He was one of those too handsome to trust friends Rachel swore was just in her book club. He had an accent he couldn't quite place, like he was raised in Europe but educated at a liberal arts college with great Wi-Fi. Back then, I convinced myself he was gay. Turns out he was just flexible. Rachel had a type, soft-spoken, emotionally fluent, unavailable until she made them available. Me included. The pattern was always the same. She'd play the role of underappreciated wife, turn every disagreement into a justification, and then, when her target was just sympathetic enough, she'd pounce. The betrayal wasn't the worst part. The ease with which she carried it was. And suddenly, I wasn't angry at Derek anymore. Not really. He was just the latest rube on our carousel. Another idiot who thought he was the exception to the rule. But here's where things get interesting. Gabriel? He reached out to me. Sent me an email 2 weeks after Rachel's party with the subject line, "I think I owe you something." Inside was a confession. Not just of the affair, but of the fact that he'd ended it long before the marriage crumbled, only to find Rachel still using his name when justifying her new emotional distance. "She uses people as alibis," he wrote. "I thought I was special. I wasn't. And you deserved better." He attached screenshots. Not the kind you post online. The kind that make you sit down and rethink your entire adult life. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the victim. I was the audience. She didn't cheat for love, or lust, or even escape. She did it for control. She needed someone who worshipped her when the lights were on, and someone who feared her when they were off. And I had played both roles too well for too long. Now, I was out of the script. But I still had the final scene. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Her name's Bernice. She's the kind of woman who drinks black coffee and uses phrases like file a motion with a smile that would scare off a tax auditor. She took my call on the third ring. Ready to go nuclear? She asked without even saying hello. Not yet, I replied. But it's time we opened the bunker. She laughed. I've got your paperwork in a folder marked Pandora. Let me guess, new evidence? New clarity, I said. We talked for an hour. Went over the financials, the joint accounts Rachel hadn't touched, the ones she had, and the clause in our prenup she'd conveniently forgotten. Any infidelity, proven beyond reasonable doubt, gave me the right to claim primary residence, 60% of shared assets, and her BMW. That clause had been her idea. Just in case you go rogue, she joked. The irony was chef's kiss. When I hung up, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt focused, like a man who'd finally stopped mourning and started building again. I spent the next week quietly removing my name from every account we'd shared. Credit cards, streaming services, even the Spotify playlist we'd once called Us. There was no us anymore. Just a man who finally remembered who he was before the lies. And a woman who'd soon find herself in a house filled with pretty things and no insulation. I wasn't going to burn it all down. No, I was going to leave it standing. Empty. It started at 7:43 a.m. on a Thursday. I remember because that was the time Rachel used to brew the French press and play that one sad indie song on repeat like it was a personality. But this morning, the coffee stayed cold. I was in front of our house with a truck, 2 movers, and a clipboard signed by a judge. Nothing loud. No yelling. No drama. Just precision. The prenup clause had kicked in. Her infidelity, now documented and legally acknowledged, gave me access to reclaim everything I had a right to. And you'd be surprised how much that actually is when you look closely. The movers didn't ask questions. They were professionals. I handed them a list. They started with the piano. That was mine before it was decor. Then the teak bookshelf I built with my dad one summer before Rachel even knew my middle name. The wine fridge, the black leather chair she hated but I loved, that went, too. By the time I walked into the master bedroom, the bed looked unfamiliar. Not just emotionally, I mean physically. New sheets. New headboard. New vibe. One I hadn't picked out. That made the next step easier. I opened her closet. Took the suitcases I bought her for our 5-year anniversary, expensive ones, the kind that say, I have business in Milan, even if you're just flying to Des Moines. I tossed in every piece of clothing I had paid for, folded with surgical indifference. Her fancy loungewear, the designer heels, the coat she claimed she got on sale, she didn't. I didn't care if she wore it again. She wouldn't wear it here. I left a sticky note on the nightstand. You wanted space. I brought a tape measure. By 10:15 a.m., we were out. No broken glass. No slammed doors. Just echoes. And that silence? That was the sound of freedom. Not the kind you scream about. The kind you earn. At noon, I met with Griff again. He handed me a USB drive. What's this? I asked. Your insurance policy, he said. You said you wanted a copy of all the QR scans. Who clicked? When? Where? I plugged it into my laptop back at the apartment. The data was sobering. Her sister? Scanned it twice. Her boss? Scanned it and forwarded it. Her best friend Vanessa? Scanned it, then unfollowed her on every platform. Derek? For clicks. 4. Man was fishing for reassurance or looking for angles. Either way, he was in the deep end now. The best part? I never said a word to any of them. Not one message. Not one rebuttal. I let the truth sit in their laps like a spilled drink. You want to know who someone really is? Watch how they react when their reflection stops flattering them. The next day, Rachel showed up again. This time, at the apartment. She knocked like she had a right to. When I opened the door, she looked like someone who hadn't slept, mascara faintly smudged, hair thrown into one of those buns she used to wear when she was pretending to be low maintenance. Where's my stuff? She asked, skipping pleasantries. Which part? I said. The material? Or the mask? She rolled her eyes. Don't do this. Just tell me. I stepped aside. On the kitchen table was a list, printed and notarized, with itemized property designations. She picked it up like it might bite her. You took the piano? You haven't played a note since 2018, I said. You only liked how it looked during dinner parties. She tossed the list down. This is petty. No, I replied. This is proportionate. Her voice cracked. I never meant for it to turn into this. I studied her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I married. I saw the woman she became when I wasn't watching. The one who got good at smiling while erasing people. You didn't think it would, I said. That's the thing. You never thought it would cost you anything. She opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. She left in silence. For once, she didn't get the last word. Later that night, I sat on the couch in the apartment, my apartment, with a beer in one hand and a remote in the other. No string quartets. No toast. Just the quiet hum of a man rebuilding from the ashes of a very expensive lie. I pulled up a new playlist. First song? Start Me Up. Yeah. Seemed fitting. This wasn't healing. This was evolution. It was 2 weeks before I heard anything new. Funny thing about doing nothing, it turns out, it's one of the most powerful moves you can make. Rachel kept waiting for the retaliation. A social media post, a bitter voicemail, a dramatic appearance at her job. But I didn't give her fireworks. I gave her silence. And that silence? It was deafening. On day 15, Vanessa, her ex-best friend now, I suppose, called me. She didn't start with hello. She told me I was just jealous of her relationship, she said flatly. That I couldn't handle her happiness. I didn't respond. She actually said that you drove her to Derek. Like your lack of spontaneity strangled her. Said you were emotionally distant and didn't listen. That last part almost made me laugh. Rachel once made me listen to a 40-minute podcast about emotional availability because I said, ma'am, instead of that's wild during her story about a salad bar argument. I stayed silent. Vanessa sighed. Anyway, I told her she needed therapy, not an audience. She hung up. Just like that, Rachel's circle started shrinking. Derek's email came next. Subject line, man to man. Bold. He rambled for a few paragraphs about how things escalated without proper context, and that I had every right to feel wronged. I didn't reply, but I forwarded it to Bernice, my lawyer, just in case. Then, the punchline. He ended with, if you ever want to talk things out, I'm open to a clean slate. This doesn't have to be toxic. That was when I knew Rachel had downplayed it all. Made it seem like our marriage was already dead, like I'd emotionally checked out and she was just sweeping up the ashes. Derek still thought he was the white knight riding in after the credits rolled. Poor guy. Didn't even know he was a sequel. Week 3, I got a call from Rachel's mother. We'd never been close. She always viewed me like I was a used Honda her daughter could have upgraded from reliable, boring, too safe to be sexy. But now? Now she sounded strained. I don't know what you said, she began, but Rachel's been different. You mean quieter? I said. Yes. She's not performing anymore, I said. Takes a toll. She hesitated. I'm not calling to scold you. I'm calling because I think she's unraveling. She'll be fine, I said. She always lands on her feet. She'll just blame the floor for being uneven. Click. That Friday, I found a box at my apartment door. It was unmarked, but I knew that handwriting. Inside was my old flannel shirt, 2 photo albums, a few greeting cards, and the pair of cufflinks Rachel had given me on our wedding day. Little silver anchors. Irony was practically engraved into the hinges. At the bottom, folded and creased, was a note. Liam, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know what I'm asking for. But there are pieces of you I held on to because I wasn't ready to admit you were really gone. Now I am. I hope you're doing better than me. R. I didn't cry. Not even close. But I did sit down for a long time. Not because I missed her, but because I realized I never really had her. I had the version of her she wanted to be. The woman who needed a mirror more than a partner. And once the spotlight dimmed, there was nothing underneath but shadows. Monday came with one final ripple. Griff handed me a manila folder when I stopped by the shop to pick up a custom print job. What's this? I asked. Check the back, he said, sipping his coffee. Inside was a flyer. Ask Rachel. Same QR code. But this one had something new. A statistic. 5/8 scans from one IP address in 10 days. I raised an eyebrow. Is that Rachel's address? Griff said. I traced it. I laughed. Not a bitter one. A genuine, surprised laugh. She'd been scanning her own humiliation, trying to see who'd looked, trying to control the aftermath after she'd already lit the match. That was Rachel in a nutshell, always trying to curate the ruins. I walked through the park that afternoon, hands in my pockets, sun warm on my shoulders. Saw families, couples, a guy teaching his dog to play dead, badly. It was peaceful. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was running from something. No pressure in my chest. No heat behind my eyes. Just space. And in that space, I could finally hear myself again. Think. Breathe. I wasn't healed. But I wasn't angry anymore either. I was done. Not because she stopped loving me, but because I finally stopped trying to make sense of why she did it. Some people just want to break things, because that's the only way they feel real. I walked home slowly. No rush. After all, I had my dignity. And Rachel? She had 58 scans and a mirror that didn't flatter her anymore. A month passed. Then another. No more emails. No more boxes. No more midnight visits. Rachel had finally done the one thing I never expected. She stayed gone. Until she didn't. One Thursday morning, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find her standing there. Not dressed up, not polished. Just jeans, a sweater, and a look in her eyes that belonged to a woman standing in the ruins of her own choosing. "Don't worry," she said. "I'm not here to get anything back." "Then why?" I asked. She glanced down, shuffled her feet like a kid who just got caught sneaking a cookie. "I thought maybe we could talk. Just once. So I can explain everything." I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. She didn't sit. Neither did I. We stood in my kitchen, where the light hit just right, and where her perfume no longer lingered. She took a deep breath, steadying herself like she'd rehearsed a speech. "I know I don't deserve to ask for this, but I want you to know, what happened with Derek, it wasn't about love, or even lust. It was about feeling like I still mattered to someone, like I still had power." I said nothing. She continued. "You were stable, kind, predictable, and I started mistaking comfort for invisibility." I looked her in the eye. "And whose fault was that?" She flinched. "I didn't come here to argue," she said quietly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for the affair, but for everything before it. For shrinking you down to fit my idea of what a man should be." I gave a small nod. "Thanks for saying it," I said. "But it doesn't fix anything." She nodded back. "I know." She reached into her pocket and slid something across the table. A small USB stick. "What's that?" I asked. "Everything," she said. "Texts, call logs, messages between me and Derek and the others. In case you ever want to know the full story." I didn't pick it up. She turned to go. Hand on the doorknob. She stopped. "You really did deserve better." I looked at her. Not as a husband. Not even as a man who'd been betrayed. But as someone who survived. "I know," I said. And then she left, for real this time. The USB stick sat on my desk for 3 days. I moved it twice. Almost plugged it in once. But I didn't. Because I already knew what I needed to know. Knowing who she messaged, what she said, how she justified it, it didn't matter anymore. That was for her. Her guilt. Her need to explain. I didn't need closure from the wound. I'd already stopped the bleeding. Instead, I mailed the USB back. No note. Just her guilt, returned to sender. I started focusing on other things, real things. Things with depth. I rebuilt my photography hobby. Started a side project helping local veterans set up businesses. Spent more time with Griff. Even started dating again. Nothing serious. Just coffee and conversation with people who didn't lie for sport. Rachel faded into the background like a ghost in a photo. Still visible, but no longer haunting. The world didn't end. It simply got quieter. And in that silence, I found myself again. Not the man I was before her, but the man I became because of what she did. Someone stronger. Someone sharper. Someone who now knew how to smell smoke before the fire started. It happened 6 months later. I was at a charity auction. Suit, drink in hand, standing near the patio when I heard the name whispered nearby. Rachel Sutton. She's over by the art exhibit. I turned my head. Just slightly. Enough to see her. She was alone, wearing a black dress that used to turn heads. Now, people barely glanced. Derek wasn't with her. Word had gotten around. About the QR code. The scandal. The quiet divorce that followed once he found out he wasn't the only new beginning she'd lined up. She made eye contact. For a second, I saw a flicker of something. Shame. Maybe. Regret. But I didn't give her a nod. I didn't smile. I didn't do anything. Because that's how you win against people like her. You become the chapter they don't get to be part of anymore. You become the life they don't get to rewrite. I turned back to my drink. The music swelled. Somewhere, someone was laughing. I joined in. Because my story? It didn't end in betrayal. It began with it.